Hey everyone, Mr. Sujano here, your source for gaming, tech, emulation, and open source news. Let's get started. Alright, to kick things off, it's April Fool's, but this is not an April Fool's video. We covered some April Fool's stuff yesterday, and we'll cover some more stuff today. I'll let you know when something is an April Fool and when it's not, and that way nobody is fooled. And we'll start out by talking about M.A.M.E. on Android with M.A.M.E. for Droid 2024, and this is not an April Fool. Now, if this update seems familiar, it's because it is. We talked about this one a couple of days ago when they updated it on the Google Play Store, and now they've updated it on their GitHub. So version 1.11.1 is the latest update. They've updated this to M.A.M.E. 0.264 to bring it in line with the mainline version. They've also improved the haptics, they've added BSP-D8 controller support, and they've added some new CRT Neo Geo shaders. M.A.M.E. for Droid 2024 is 100% free, it's open source, and it's available either on Google Play or right from GitHub. Moving on, and we're talking about touchHLE, which is a high-level emulator for iPhone OS apps. Now, it's worth pointing out that touchHLE is not for 64-bit iOS apps, it's for older versions of the software, for example, iPhone OS 2. Anyways, version 0.2.2 is just dropped, and they say this is not an April Fool's joke. There are some new working apps, Rayman 2, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, Earthworm Jim, and Castle of Magic. On top of that, and this is pretty big, there is now support for iPhone OS 3.0 apps. touchHLE is 100% free, it's open source, and it's available for Android, Mac, and Windows. I'll drop a link to it in the description below. Next up, we're talking about Ruffle, which is an open source Flash player emulator, and the Android version of this just got a brand new update. So version 2024.04.02 has just dropped, and we've got some optimizations and bug fixes. This is still pretty early on in terms of overall development. It's not even a year old yet. But I will drop a link to it in the description below in the event that you wanted to check it out. It's 100% free and open source. Next up, we're talking about RetroBat, which is meant to be an all-in-one solution for emulation, using Emulation Station, RetroArch, and standalone emulators and trying to configure all of them. So RetroBat has just dropped version 6.1, which arguably is pretty big. They've added in the Othello Multivision, the Nokia N-Gage, PSX M.A.M.E., Eichmann Go, which is great for Musion. They've also added a standalone version of FB Neo, which is great for arcade games. And they bumped RetroArch to version 1.17. There's been a whole bunch of controller configurations here, including adding a gun option to Retro M.A.M.E., M.A.M.E. 2003 Plus, and M.A.M.E. 2016 cores. And there's also now a first implementation for wheel support. Under currently supported wheels, they've got the Logitech G29. Under experimental, they've got the G920, Driving Force GT, G923, and the Thrustmaster T300 RS. Additionally, there's a whole bunch of fixes and optimizations. RetroBat is 100% free and open source, and you guessed it, I'll drop a link in the description below. Next up, we're talking about GBE+, which stands for Subscribe to Mr. Sujano, or Game Boy Enhanced Plus, depending on how you want to interpret that. Anyways, this is a Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, and Pokemon Mini emulator. And since it is April 1st, right on schedule, GBE Plus just got its yearly release. If you don't believe me, head on over to their GitHub and you can see that they've released it every single year on April 1st since back in 2017. So GBE Plus version 1.8 is the latest update, and they say here once again not many exciting changes under the hood. GBE Plus is in the very last stretches of emulating some very complex and exotic hardware, so much of last year's work was to that end. You know what they say, the last 10% of a project takes 90% of the time. And as for the notable changes, they've reworked Pokemon Mini NetPlay to be much simpler. They added support for the Gluco Boy. They improved support for the Camfo Advance. They've improved support for the PlayYan and PlayYan Micro. And they added support for the Nintendo MP3 player, but there is no audio or video output yet, but menus are accessible. Next up, we're talking about arcade emulation on PC, Mac, or the Pi with, I'm going to butcher this one because I always do, Hypseus Singe, and this is a fork of Daphne. Anyways, version 2.12.2 just released. It's the first update since August of 2023, and this one is pretty big. So on top of a whole bunch of bug fixes, we've got some optimizations and brand new features. For example, Atari European ROMs are now supported. but they do require the proper Laserdisc content. GP World now offers authentic steering strengths and includes Auto Center, and they've added game controller rumble haptics. Next up, we're talking about Discord, and if you use Discord, chances are you're gonna start to see some ads. According to the Wall Street Journal, Discord is to start showing ads for gamers to, surprise, surprise, boost revenue. There are reports out there that users will be able to turn off ads. I don't know if it's turning off personal ads or ads as a whole. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Next up, we're talking about Tekken 8, and it appears that some information that was just unveiled has resulted in a bit of controversy. The first one here is the introduction of Tekken Fight Passes. This is similar to a battle pass and was not included with the collector's edition of this game. So the base game for Tekken 8 is about $70 US, and this does not include any DLC characters. The Deluxe and Ultimate Edition, I sometimes call the Ultimate Edition the collector's edition, do include DLC characters. It includes the Year 1 character pass. However, the battle pass is something completely different. So on top of having microtransactions in the form of the Tekken shop, we've now got a battle pass. Now, taking a look at the reactions around the internet, and people don't seem to be too happy with this announcement. I mean, right on over here on the Tekken subreddit, and there are some not so nice comments about it. The general feeling is that this is a $70 game. Why is it being treated like a free-to-play one? Next up, we're quickly talking about Hollow Knight's Silksong, and no, this is not a joke. No, this is not an April Fool's. If you head on over to the Xbox website, the game appears to be listed. I'll drop a link to this in the description below. There is no release date, and there is no way to purchase it. However, there is a description, there are images, and this does not appear to be put up by accident. Hopefully we're one step closer to Silksong. Next up, we're talking about Google, and if you thought browsing in incognito mode was actually private, you may be mistaken. If I remember correctly, about 4 or 5 years ago, there was a lawsuit against Google, and we've now got a settlement. So Louisa says, historic privacy settlement in which Google agrees to delete browsing data collected in incognito mode and more. So part of this settlement says Google with this settlement agrees to rewrite its disclosures to inform users that Google collects private browsing data, including by explicitly disclosing that fact in its privacy policy and on the incognito splash screen that automatically appears at the beginning of every incognito session. Additionally, for the next 5 years, Google must also maintain a change to incognito mode that enables incognito users to block third-party cookies by default. This change is important given that Google has used third-party cookies to track users in incognito mode on non-Google websites. And Google must delete the private browsing detection bits the plaintiffs uncovered, which Google was twice sanctioned for concealing. As a result, Google will no longer track people's choice to browse privately. If you are curious about this and wanted to learn more about it, I'll drop a couple of helpful links in the description below. Next up, we're talking about POed, which was a first-person shooter released on the 3DO back in 1995. And it appears the game is getting a definitive edition. It is heading to Steam, PS4, PS5, Xbox, and also Nintendo Switch. If you are curious about this one, I'll drop a link to it in the description below. It's a very interesting game. Unfortunately, I do not have a release date for it just yet, other than coming soon. It's being published by Night Drive Studios. Next up, I wish this one was April Fool's, but it's not. AT&T has confirmed a massive data breach. So here's the statement from AT&T, and I'll drop a link to it in the description below. It says, "It has come to our attention that a number of AT&T passcodes have been compromised. We are reaching out to all 7.6 million impacted customers. To the best of our knowledge, the compromised data appears to be from 2019 or earlier and does not contain personal financial information or call history. However, there is something very concerning. In the frequently asked questions section under what information was involved, they say the information varied by customer and account, but may have included full name, email address, mailing address, phone number, social security number, date of birth, AT&T account number, and passcode." And digging into the FAQ just a little bit more, and things appear to get even worse. So in the top message, they say it impacts 7.6 million customers, but they didn't mention former customers. And they say here it impacts 65.4 million former account holders. Add that to the 7.6 and there's over 70 million impacted customers. If you wanted to learn more about this one, I'll drop this link in the description below and feel free to check it out. If you think you may have been impacted, there is some helpful information here. And speaking about hacking, next up we're talking about mission control. And this app lets you use controllers from other consoles natively on your Nintendo Switch via Bluetooth. And Mission Control version 0.11.0 just released. This update allows it to work with Switch firmware 18.0.0. And continuing to speak about hacking, next up we're talking about a very interesting blog. It's called Maurice's blog, and the article is titled Bypassing Denuvo in Hogwarts Legacy. So it appears that Maurice was able to somehow bypass Denuvo. He does explain some things about Denuvo and how it works and impacts to performance. Maurice even has a video on YouTube showcasing some Denuvo performance impact. It's a very interesting process, and it's a very interesting check that Denuvo does every now and then. I'll drop a link to this video in the description below and feel free to check it out. So based on this testing, there are a couple of things to point out. Maurice determines that Denuvo causes at least some non-zero performance overhead. He then says, of course, that's no absolute proof that Denuvo does not kill the performance. However, I wasn't able to find any indication of any kind of relevant performance kills caused by Denuvo that would require a more thorough analysis. So to summarize that, it appears there are some performance impacts, but they may not be as bad as you'd think. But moving on, and next up we're talking about a game that doesn't have Denuvo, and this one's called Content Warning. It's on Steam. It's currently 100% free until the end of April 2nd. This game has an overwhelmingly positive review score. And they say, film your friends doing scary things to become SpookyTube famous. And last up here, we're going over some April Fool's stuff. We covered some yesterday, and well, we're doing some today. So here is Dragon Ball Legends on mobile, and they brought in the menacing farmer with a shotgun to compete against. For Pokemon Go, nice throws or better will register as excellent throws, thanks to Professor Willow. Sky Emu proposed changing their mascot to the old Twitter logo, and they've even got a nice write-up. And finally, the people behind Nether SX2, which is a patch for Aether SX2, which is a PS2 emulator on Android, have released Grinder SX2 for April 1st. But anyways, that is all I've got for you in this one. Straight to the point, all stuff and no fluff. We talked about a bunch today. Let me know your thoughts about absolutely any of it in the comments below. If you like this video, leave a like. If you didn't like this video, leave a like. Hit that subscribe button. Check out my other videos. Don't tempt fate. Save your state.